Body Logic Physiotherapy, empowering people to achieve better health.
Before, if I moved and there was pain, I would immediately stop because I was listening to my body, and the pain meant stop. Stop whatever you're doing. That's not the right thing to do. The new movement was, oh, the pain's still there, but that's okay. You can still move. And I kept exercising or walking, mostly walking when I was in severe pain.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Empowered Beyond Pain podcast, proudly brought to you by Body Logic Physiotherapy. In today's episode, we talk to Megan, who had a history of debilitating back pain. She had seen many health professionals and had 3 spinal surgeries, but was still experiencing serious pain. Her pain had a dramatic impact on her life as a busy mum of 4 young kids, and unsurprisingly was accompanied by panic and depression. But about 4 to 5 years ago, she finally found a health professional who was able to coach her back to living. And a big part of that was reframing what the experience of pain meant. We discuss her journey and the strategies she used to retrain her brain to detrain her pain in the context of Fact 5 from the 10 facts every person needs to know about back pain research paper. Fact 5, as narrated by pain patient advocate Tina, was:
pain with exercise and movement doesn't mean you're doing harm.
When pain persists, it is common that the spine and surrounding muscles become really sensitive to touch and with movement. Importantly, the pain you feel during movement and activities reflects how sensitive your structures are, not how damaged you are. So it's safe and normal to feel some pain when you start to move and exercise. This usually settles down with time as you get more active. In fact, exercise and movement are one of the most effective ways to treat back pain, and having a health professional coach you through the process can be helpful. It's great to have you here listening or watching this with us from wherever you are around the world. Thanks for taking time out of your day to learn about the new science around pain and what to do about it. Some of you may recognise Megan from the West Australian Department of Health run Pain Health website, where she has done a patient story video previously. You can find a link to her story, which I refer many patients to, as well as infographics and any other relevant links discussed in today's episode on the show notes page, which is www.bodylogic.physio/podcast. We hope you're having a great day wherever you're listening in from. Please share this conversation if you know someone who would benefit. And remember to ask, is there more to pain than damage? Megan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
We're starting here with episode 15 of the podcast, and we're addressing fact number 5 from the Back Pain Facts paper. This came about as a result of, as you've heard in episode 4 and 5, several people with back pain going through a process where they covered, and there was these 10 myths that kept holding people back. And the myth we're addressing today is pain related to exercise and movement is always a warning that harm is being done to the spine and a signal to stop and modify activity. So you have a lived experience of these sort of myths holding you back. So I was wondering if you could start just by telling, sort of summarising your story of your back pain experience.
Okay, for sure. So I've always, in my teens, I started having a little bit of back pain when I overdid things. It wasn't terribly bad, just once or twice I hurt my back carrying something heavy. And then I had 4 children, and in my late 30s and 40s, my back pain got worse and worse. Every time I carried something heavy or lifted suitcases or did something unusual, and I would hurt my back, and it would last for a few days. I'd have a pain episode, but it would get better, and then I'd move on, take a few anti-inflammatories, move on. But then in my mid-40s, I was spending a long time sitting at the computer, and my back got worse and worse and worse. And I lifted some heavy bee boxes one day off the beehives, and my back went, and I didn't get better. I thought it would go in after a few days, but it didn't get better, and it ended up with me having a back operation where I had a slip disc and then had the back operation. And my rehab after that was fine. Got better quite quickly, no problem. And I did all the exercises, I did all the bracing, and I looked after myself when I was bending over, and all the things I was told to do, I did. And my back seemed to be fine. But then 2 years later, it happened again. And I ended up having 2 more operations, and I didn't bounce back after those operations. And I couldn't understand it because I was doing everything I was told to do. And I would also rest. They told me to, when I hurt my back badly, just to rest and it would come right. And I was resting, and it never came right. And then I saw a series of physios and nothing helped. I would try their different solutions, didn't work. And then I finally found one that worked for me. And they taught me to unlearn a lot of the things that I'd learned. And I learned that I could bend my back when I was picking up things. I could exercise. I could push through pain. And by walking and pacing myself, I could actually get through the pain periods, and I was much stronger at the end of it.
Can I take you back? You said after the surgeries that you kind of got stuck. What do you think was different? Because after the first surgery, you said you were good.
Yes.
What was different about your experience after the second and third surgeries?
I think after the second and third surgeries, my response to pain was a very learned one. So in the beginning, I would start to gradually feel pain and it would build up over time. And I'd go from 0 to 100 over a period of time. But the second time, I'd go from 0 to 100 in a few hours. It was like my body knew.
Ramped up.
Yes, it knew how to. I got really good at feeling pain. And any little thing that happened to me, if I tweaked my back, suddenly I was in pain. Whereas before, you tweak your back and move on. Right. But I think what was a learned response to pain.
That's interesting.
Immediately would freeze and panic and think, I've done it again. It's gone. I've gone down that rabbit hole. It's too late. I've done it.
Yeah.
And
so that's interesting. You're saying there's both a learnt response, but that's a learnt thinking response and an emotional response as well?
Yes, I think so.
So you talk about panic.
Yes, and fear. Like, I've done it again. I'm going exactly, I'm heading for the 4th operation.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And those operations were scary for you? Or that whole process was scary for you?
Yes, because I've never had anything wrong before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. And what did you make of the fact that you had this ongoing pain and you'd so-called been fixed by the surgery? How did you make sense of that?
I thought there was something wrong with my back.
Right.
That there was some mechanism in my back and I'd hurt it and I could never recover. And I thought that once you had back pain, you would always have back pain.
Right. And had someone told you that?
I think my mother always had back pain and she always had a sore back. And so, and when I was growing up, I was always told, don't slouch, don't sit with your legs crossed. Yeah. You know, every time I picked up something, I was told, be careful, watch your back, watch your back.
So you had early messages from a very young age that your back was vulnerable and needed to be protected.
Yes. And if it ever got hurt, to just stop what you're doing.
Right.
And don't do that. Do something else that won't hurt your back.
Yeah, okay. And so during that process when you felt like you had trained the pain, sort of what you're saying, isn't it? To become hyper alert to your pain.
Unintentionally.
Yeah, we get that. It's not like you'd want to do that. What do you think was happening in your body? Because obviously they were the thoughts and the feelings around your pain, but what did you think was happening in your body at the time?
I think my body was it would freeze. It would get tighter. It would be like just get tense and tight and exacerbate what was going on.
So in a sense, that learnt pain response was also a learnt protective response.
Yes,
where you were guarding and protecting your body because of the fear of doing stuff.
And also because I didn't feel I could make it come right on its own, that I couldn't heal it.
Right.
It was protecting it from any more degeneration.
Yeah, okay. Had you been told you had degeneration?
I think I was told that once I would always have a vulnerable back. Yes, I was told that.
Yeah, okay. And so were you given specific advice to protect your back?
Given lots of advice. Yeah. Okay.
So give me examples of what that looked like.
So as a small example, when I was loading the dishwasher, I was taught to stand up tall, suck in my core, and then bend from the knees and never bend my back sort of lift the dishes out the dishwasher.
Yeah, okay.
Never lift more than a 6-pack of beer was the weight advice I was given.
Okay.
Lift everything.
Yeah.
Basically, don't bend over.
And that was after your surgeries. You've been told that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And were you ever told that was just for a short period of time and that you could go back to normal at any time? Or was that told to you like this is your new future?
Yes, that was the new me.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think, I'm not sure if I was told it, but I sort of believed it was something that was a downward spiral.
Yeah, okay.
So this had happened. I had a vulnerable back, and then pain was inevitable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And that must have been pretty scary for you because you're, very young, and you naturally were someone who had been very active as well up until then.
Yes.
So how did that feel?
Well, I think I was quite depressed about it, actually. I thought it was the end of my life as I knew it. I thought I will always be in pain. I've just got to manage it. I can't do all these things I want to do. And if I do want to do them, I'll have to do it with pain, and I'll have to make pain my friend.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't want to take all the drugs that were given to me freely and gaily.
Okay.
But, I think it was very distressing.
Yeah. And so what was the explanation that you were given by the various people you saw for the reason you had this ongoing pain?
I think they said I was born like that. It was just genetic, and that was my lot in life.
Okay. And so you were thinking that wasn't something that could change?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there was still a little glimmer of hope that you could do something. What drove that, do you think? Because you didn't just accept it by the sounds.
Well, it didn't make sense that I could
go... So what bit didn't make sense?
It didn't make sense that I could go from being very active and have a full life to suddenly having a vulnerable back. And I couldn't accept it that I was so young. And it was also a bit of a bleak outlook. I wanted to be able to do and I also had 4 young children, and I didn't have time to lie around because that's what I was being told is to rest. And I didn't have the time to do that. So I started looking for health professionals who had lots of success with back pain, and I thought there must be a different way to treat my back that didn't involve drugs. Because also I did try the painkillers and they didn't work. They worked in the beginning, but not after a while.
So the effect we know.
Yeah. So I just kept looking for another solution.
Yeah, okay. So the kind of picture that you paint before you went down that other path was, your back's genetically vulnerable. It's now you got a back you just got to live with and look after and manage, and your management was to protect it and rest, and you didn't really have time for that, and it went against your grain as well, which is why you thought I need to do something different.
Yes, exactly right.
And that was impacting on both your emotional, mental health, physical health, your ability to do stuff, just do normal things with your children, all of those things.
It's a very lonely place to be because you can't explain your pain to anyone else. Yeah. And a lot of people are in pain, and you just got to suck it up. And you want to suck it up, but it's always present.
Yeah. So how was that? How did that change then to go from a point where you were terrified and feeling panicked to have pain, to build trust in your body again? Because that sounds like a tough journey.
Well, it's a long process, and at the beginning I didn't think it was possible, but I did find someone who was treating me who told me in our first meeting that he'd seen lots of people like me and that I would get totally back to normal. And I remember crying, sitting in the car afterwards crying, because he'd also made me bend over in our assessment. And that was something I didn't actually do, and I didn't think I could do it without pain. So I think my journey started with trusting him, trusting his expertise, and then allowing myself to take his advice and not be scared of his advice. So we did everything slowly. So I got back in the gym and I would lift things, but we started off with very light things. They were just a whisper of a box. And then by the end, I was picking up a big box, like my beehives. And it was...
Because that was one of your goals, wasn't it? To go back to doing the lifting, which was what you originally hurt yourself with.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So that was quite a potent...
And I was very afraid of picking up those heavy boxes.
Yeah, right. Because previously you'd hurt yourself.
And I also had this concept that a slipped disc, that your disc was like a little round disc that kind of slid in and out of your spine. And I
Right.
felt that it was easy when you picked up a box for your disc to just slide out.
Okay.
So I always had to be retaught all those things, that it's not, it's a bulging disc. It's not, there's nothing slipped about it.
Yeah,
and,
right.
and once I was explained the mechanics, and I got the confidence to pick up the heavy things. But it was a process. It was.
And how long did that take?
I reckon it took about 9 months to be confident. And I still have it. I still go to do something and I think, oh, should I do that? Then I think, you're fine. Just pick it up. Don't think about it. Bend your back. Don't brace yourself. Don't suck up any core. Just do it. So it's still an ongoing.
Yeah. So that
mind battle.
those things sneak back in, like the doubt.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's something you have to update yourself with all the time.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And during that process, was it painful to do? Did you experience pain when you were starting to get moving differently and use your body differently? And how was that? Given that pain to you was a signal that and created panic, how was it to stay calm while you were doing that and trust that you weren't doing harm to yourself?
Well, it's pretty hard. But I think when I understood as well that all pain starts in your brain, I was able to tell my brain to cut it out, just stop, and I'd be able to calm myself down and go, you're not actually in pain, you're not hurting yourself. This might feel uncomfortable, this might feel painful, but it's not hurting you, so keep doing it.
That's quite a hard message to swallow, though, that your brain itself is trying to protect you because of a memory of something, but that protection is now not needed.
It is, but I think it is a very, it shows my age. When I was a child, you were told if you had a brain injury or if you broke something in your brain, you would never be able to fix it. That was it. Right. That was your lot in life. But now we know that a brain repairs itself.
Yeah, right.
So we know the brain is
plastic.
Plastic, exactly. And you can teach your brain not to feel the pain. You've got to get off that super highway.
And how did you do that? Because I know our listeners would love to know what tools you had to do that.
I think it's practice. It's like any activity, you've got to practice it, and you've got to
practice what?
Teaching your brain to stop panicking.
How though? I'm just interested. I'm really interested in that.
So for me,
because it's everyone's different.
So obviously. I used a lot of meditation.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of breath.
Yeah.
I still do it.
Yeah.
I calm myself. I calm my breathing.
Okay. Yep.
And I'm a very visual person.
Yep.
So I use color in my thoughts. It sounds wacky, but I do.
It's actually.
I breathe in blue and I make it swirl around my brain and I breathe it out. And when I teach my kids, I say breathe in, accept the pain, and push it out.
So that's kind of like, in a sense, using meditation and breathing and visualization to calm your nervous system.
Yes.
Before you engage with something that's scary. So it kind of inhibits your panic response while you do it.
Yes, because the panic response is really strong.
Yeah.
And it can take over. I mean, I think that's how we survive.
Yeah. And how strong is that panic response now in you? If you look at where it was at the beginning and look at where you are now, say for lifting and stuff.
Oh, it's nowhere near.
Right.
Nowhere near. Yeah. And it's wonderful to have it so small. It's still there. I'm not going to say it's not there. It does come back. And sometimes, like if I get a tingle down my leg, I think, and then I have to remind myself it's okay. So it's it takes a bit of time and a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And it's like climbing up a ladder. You go 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 forward, and you just got to keep going.
Yeah. And how long's it been now?
Well, I think
that you've been kind of at the other side of this journey.
So I think about 4.5 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And have you had any major events in that time?
No.
Does that surprise you?
No, now that I know what I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you do now to keep your back healthy?
So the minute I hurt my back, because I do sometimes get tired, and often my tiredness, I feel tiredness, physical tiredness, as back pain, and I now know that it's not back pain; it's just me being tired.
Yeah,
so instead of resting like I used to, I now go for a walk or do Pilates or go to gym, something like that.
So you use activity, physical activity, as your mechanism of kind of rebooting your system rather than resting, which is what previously you've been told to do.
Whereas before I just rest.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Can you take us back to, I'm interested, when you were unloading the dishwasher with all those strategies that you were told, can you take us back to that time and sort of put us into your shoes and talk to us about the things you were thinking were happening in your back?
I think what I was doing all the time was like a body scan. No matter what I was doing, whether it was unloading the dishwasher or in my car, I was constantly scanning my back for any alarm signals. So it was pretty all-consuming, actually. And every movement I made, I would think about my back first. Whereas before I did any back trouble, I never thought about my back. It didn't cross my mind. So I think now that I'm further down the line, I just don't think about it anymore.
Mm-hmm. And when you were, using those strategies, and maybe you can talk to some of the things that you were told to do around, you mentioned bracing your core and don't bend your back. Was that helpful for you? When you were doing it?
Oh, so when I was bracing and when I was not? No, I think I did a lot of damage.
So that was uncomfortable or it was painful for you while you were doing that?
Yeah, I think it was. And I think when I used to pick up things, I'd go down onto my haunches and then I would stand up with them, and it was really heavy and really uncomfortable, and it often hurt my back. Now when I just bend over naturally and pick something up, it's a fluid movement and there's no pain.
Isn't that interesting compared to, if we look at the common messages around back pain and around ergonomic advice, it's all the stuff that you were doing, and yet you were doing all those things and you still had pain. In fact, you sort of felt like you were doing more damage.
Yes.
So can you kind of contrast, back then you were thinking, you were sort of scanning, you were on kind of threat detection mode, you were looking for any sort of sign that potentially you were going to hurt your back. What are the thoughts that go through your head now, or how do you sort of overcome that?
So now I think I pretty much don't even think about it, but it took a while for me to do that. And sometimes I do. If it's something particularly big, I do consider it. And then I just go through the process of going, take a breath, do it the natural way, bend over and lift. So I don't have the fear because I know and I'm confident I'm not going to hurt my back. So I think the fear exacerbates it and makes it worse, and then makes your back pain even worse.
So I remember you mentioned earlier, before we started recording this, that you were at the beach once and you were doing some bending. Can you talk us through that experience?
So I was just bending over and touching my toes and stretching out my back in a very natural way. And a friend of mine who's a doctor rushed over to me and said, don't do that. You're going to slip a disc again, because he knew my history. And it did. I got a fright and I stopped doing what I was doing, and I knew he was wrong. But because he was a doctor, I don't know, I became a bit subservient, and I was like, And
so it made you doubt what you were doing.
It did make me doubt it, because he does know what he's talking about. But when I thought about it, and then I spoke to my physio about it, and he said, no, what you're doing is right. Let's keep going down that path. And then I haven't looked back.
Interesting. Because I think what it highlights is that these messages that, Kev, and you're alluding to are everywhere.
Yes.
But you don't have to walk far in a workplace or in a manual setting to hear people advising around how you should hold your body and how you should protect your body, how you should sit, and all these rules that we have. What are your thoughts on that now in kind of hindsight?
Well, I always want to stop people and correct them and say, no, you can actually do that. And I have to stop myself sometimes because it's none of my business. But no, I think for me, my thoughts are that it's given me such freedom. It's given me a normal life. I don't have back pain. It's given me the tools. So instead of hurting myself more, I've got the tools not to hurt my back again.
So the other thing that I'd love you to kind of touch on is if you talk to others, and there'll be lots of people who will listen to this and maybe reflect on their own experience, or clinicians who are working with people who are in a similar situation. And when someone's in a lot of pain and they're frightened and their body's in protective mode, what would you tell them? What would you say to them? Or for a clinician, and maybe also for a person who was in your situation, given your experience, what advice would you give the clinician, and what advice would you give
So my advice
the patient
would
or
be,
the person?
I definitely do refer them to the people that I use, because I think to have a strong healthcare team behind you who talk about neuroplasticity and who talk about the new way of treating backs is so important. Also, suggest some of the books that I read on neuroplasticity. And I also tell them to rethink how they have been thinking. And we talk about the things we've been talking about now, about the bracing yourself. And I tell them to just walk every time you saw, just walk. And even if you can only walk to the first street light and back, just to do that, but then do it 10 times during the day.
And the other thing that we often hear is people, when they have a setback, lose trust.
Yes.
And you must have had some setbacks in your journey. How did you overcome them?
I did have a few setbacks, but the flip side was going back to how I'd been before and taking the drugs.
Didn't want to go there.
I didn't want. They don't work.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't work. And doing things the way I had been doing and didn't work. So I knew I was on the right path.
Yeah,
I really believed that.
Yeah.
And I still know I'm on the right path.
That's interesting. What would you tell healthcare practitioners who may see someone like you who's had 3 spinal surgeries, who's had, a history of 3 disc prolapses, who's fearful and guarded? What advice would you give them?
I would very gently suggest that maybe the way we thought about things 20 years ago or 10 years ago even is not the right way. Things have changed enormously. And I firmly believe if I had come into my current physio before my first operation, I would never have had that one. It's my bad luck that I didn't meet him before. But I was still buying into all the old myths and the things that I'd learnt as a child and as a young adult, and I thought they were true. And everyone does the best they can do.
That's right. Yeah.
So I would say to those doctors, or just to maybe speak to more people like me who've done it both ways now. Yeah,
it's interesting because you've had both journeys, really, haven't you? Kind of like a tale of 2 stories. And I think too, the other thing we know about healthcare practitioners, often they become frightened that we don't want to hurt people.
No,
we don't want to do harm to people, and so sometimes it taps into us as healthcare practitioners, of someone who may have pain when they move, is we're often thinking maybe this is bad for them. And that's a really hard bridge it's like a coach. Yeah. If we're working as a coach and we're asking people to do stuff that's actually painful or that's scary and that making someone panic, it's very easy to kind of back away from that. But it sounds like taking you back to those things was the key.
Yes.
And so actually having the confidence to go, you know what, we've got to take little steps, but actually the confidence to go back to it. And even if you have a hiccup, go back to it again, but do it in a way that's not overwhelming.
But Pete, I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own. I had to have someone who I really trusted knew more than me.
Yeah.
And I had to have that someone holding my hand because I was really scared that I was going to do more damage.
Yeah.
So I think...
So that's key then.
That is key.
The trust is key. Yeah.
And then also doing your own research.
Yeah.
And for me, it's reading and YouTube videos of finding other people who are in the same position and realizing that there actually is life after back pain and it gets better. Because if they had told me on that first day that in 5 years I wouldn't be feeling back pain, I would have found it hard to believe because it was so much part of my life.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So I'm hearing that the trust was a really, really important part of kind of holding your hand and guiding you through that process.
Yeah.
You know, we and also like listening to other people's stories, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with this podcast, is to showcase people's stories.
That's great.
And let's say we've got what we do have lots of people listening here that might be experiencing back pain at this time, and they might be worried about when they bend over that they're causing more damage to their back, and that pain means that you should stop what you're doing and be careful with it. If you look back at your journey and back to those times when you were thinking sort of along those lines, what were maybe if we can summarize into a couple or a few of the key messages, or looking back, the key lessons that helped you get to where you are now?
My key lessons was to move, to make friends with my back pain and accept it, but that it would end. And so to move on from it and to learn to also accept that it wasn't a death sentence, that it would change. And the only person who could change it was me. And I had to put in the time to change it. And I had to keep practicing until it diminished, and it did. It just slowly started to diminish, and then one day I woke up and it wasn't there anymore.
And when you say move, you know, you said the first one was just move. You know, lots of people would say you've got to kind of keep your back moving, and you go for walks, and that's general advice for probably you were trying to move before, you know, you sort of found your way out of this sort of stuff. What was different about if we call it the new movement? How would you contrast that?
Well, I think the new movement was, before, if I moved and there was pain, I would immediately stop, because I was listening to my body, and the pain meant stop whatever you're doing. That's not the right thing to do. The new movement was, oh, the pain's still there, but that's okay. You can still move. And I kept exercising or walking, mostly walking when I was in severe pain.
Interesting. And look, it's interesting to highlight this because there is some good research. Well, there are a couple of things that you highlighted which are really well evidence-based. One is mindset, is that you developed a positive mindset. You talked about the importance of a positive mindset, where before it was like, I'm doomed, this is it. But you were able to create a positive picture of your back, of your journey, that you kind of had a positive view of that process, which we know is important. It's incredibly hard for people in that space to develop it, and I presume that was something that slowly evolved. Was it? Wasn't just there, because it sounds like it wasn't there at the beginning.
No, I think I was in a dark place in the beginning, and I thought it was hopeless. I thought I would never get better. And then when I started to see that other people were getting better, and I started to see that you also think you're the only person who's ever had this back pain, and that yours is, when you hear someone else's story, you think, oh, mine's worse because of X, Y, and Z, and I'm different. I don't fall into that category. But actually, we can all get better, and we can all, and increment by increment, we can all make the small little changes. And you do get more hopeful, because slowly you realize you're getting better. So the hope builds on
itself like a snowball, like fear builds on itself like a snowball.
Exactly.
And we often talk about these parallel parts of the brain. You know, you've got your fear centers that could be really, really strengthened, or you've got these kind of positive centers that can be strengthened. It sounds like you were here and it slowly started to do that.
Exactly right, yeah.
And the other part that I think is important is there have been some reviews of studies that look at people with pain engaging in physical activity, that even physical activity that hurts them, and we know they're never worse from it, or they're not damaged and made worse from it. And I think there's a very common view that if it hurts, it means that I'm doing harm.
Yes.
And this idea of you being in pain because your whole nervous system is sensitized and your brain is in protective mode around that area, will not let you do it if you think you're harming yourself. Where in actual fact, the engaging in those activities kind of teaches you that actually you can do it and you are not harming yourself. And the more you practice, the better you get. And we see this from arthritis research to back pain research. Actually engaging painful body parts with movement and activity in a graded way is actually beneficial. But it's a really hard message to sell to people when what they do hurts and their brain's saying, don't do it.
Yeah. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And you have to teach yourself.
Yeah, and that's the key with having a coach, I think, who can go hold your hand and go, it's scary, but it's safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I definitely couldn't have done it on my own. There's no way. I just wouldn't have had the confidence.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks again for tuning in into another episode of the Empowered Beyond Pain podcast. Wow, what a transformation Megan had gone through. Modern science has been telling us for a while now that our bodies are bioplastic, meaning our biology, neurology, muscles, discs, joints, cartilage, and many other bodily structures and systems are adaptable and changeable in the right environment. My key take-homes were Megan's reframing of pain meaning danger and stop to pain being okay and not a direct sign of damage was key. Her learning that all pain comes from the brain was important for her. Now, importantly, this doesn't mean that pain isn't real or that it's made up. It simply means that pain is a little bit more complex than being a direct reflection of the health of our tissues. Having a trusted coach to hold her hand was paramount for her turning her journey around and realising that discs don't slip. As pain scientist Professor Lorimer Moseley is quoted to say, discs don't slip, ever. And finally, we should be sceptical of the ergonomic dogmas of keep your back straight, brace your core, and sit up tall. They aren't as evidence-based as what we used to think, which we'll discuss more of in the next episode of the podcast. We hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, please share it with your networks and tag us at EBP Podcast on the socials. We wish you safety and health wherever you are, and hope you remember to ask, is there more to pain than damage? Please note, what you heard on this episode of Empowered Beyond Pain is strictly for information purposes only and does not substitute individualised care from a trusted and licensed health professional. If you would like individualised, high-value care for your pain, sports or pelvic health problem, head to the Body Logic website and make an appointment. Theme music generously provided by Fervin and Cash.